The night wind whispered through the cottonwoods like a hymn too shy to speak. The town of Dusty Creek slept under a silver moon, and the last lantern on Main Street flickered behind the frosted glass of the old church window. Inside, a soft glow trembled across wooden pews, catching the lace veil of a young bride who sat alone at the altar, her hands folded tight as if she could keep her heart from breaking. Her name was Clara May Holt, barely 19, raised on the edge of the prairie where the sky met forever. All her life, she dreamed of love the way a child dreams of heaven, something too beautiful to touch. Tonight, that dream trembled before her in the shape of a quiet man who had saved her family's honor. Outside, Caleb Boone, the man she'd just married, stood beside his horse, the wind tugging at his coat. He wasn't the sort who smiled easy. His eyes held the weight of too many miles, too many graves. He'd seen war, drought, and the kind of loneliness that made a man forget his own voice. Yet somehow, tonight, his silence felt different, gentler, uncertain, like a prayer he didn't know how to say. He hadn't meant to marry her. That was the truth. But when the banker came for her father's land and demanded the girl as payment, Caleb stepped forward in that church without thinking twice. "She'll be my wife," he'd said, voice low, eyes steady. No man takes what don't belong to him. It had been a deal sealed by mercy, not love, or so everyone thought. Now, in the tiny cabin at the far edge of town, the two newlyweds faced a night neither had been ready for. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old smoke. A single oil lamp burned low, casting long shadows that moved like ghosts against the log walls. Clara stood near the window, her wedding dress still on, fingers brushing the curtain lace. The train of her gown was dusty from the walk home, and her heart beat so hard it hurt. Caleb came in quietly, removing his hat, setting it on the table beside the lamp. He didn't look at her right away, just took off his gun belt, hung it by the door, and sat down on the edge of the bed like a man unsure where he belonged. "You can rest easy," he said finally, voice rough from silence. "I'll sleep out by the fire." Clara turned toward him, her voice a whisper barely stronger than the wind. "It's my first night, Mr. Boone." The words hung between them like a secret she hadn't meant to speak. Then, softer still, she added, "Love heart." He looked up at her then, truly looked. The firelight caught her eyes, wide, full of innocence and something fragile he didn't have a name for. He rose slowly, every movement cautious, as if afraid she might shatter. "You don't owe me any of that, Clara," he said. "This marriage, it was to keep you safe, not to take what ain't mine." She took a step closer, the floorboards creaking under her bare feet. "You saved me, Caleb. Maybe that means it's already yours." He swallowed hard. There were no words big enough for the storm that swelled in his chest. For years, he'd ridden from one border town to the next, never staying long enough to build a home. Now here she was, a girl with soft hands and a trembling voice, offering him something he didn't think he deserved. "I ain't a good man," he said, voice low. "You should know that before you decide what kind of wife you want to be." "I don't need a good man," she whispered. "Just one who keeps his word." The wind outside sighed against the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, lonely and low. Caleb's heart ached. He turned toward the fire, stirring it with a poker, his back to her. "You best get some sleep. Tomorrow'll be a long day." But she didn't move. Instead, she walked over to him, close enough that he could feel her breath. When she spoke, her voice trembled like the flame between them. "My ma told me love ain't about grand words or fancy promises. It's about choosing to stay when it's easier to leave." She hesitated. "You stayed, Caleb." He closed his eyes. "I did. Then maybe that's love enough for tonight." The quiet stretched long and deep, broken only by the soft crackle of wood and the sound of her heart trying to find its rhythm beside his. Caleb turned at last, slowly, carefully, and found her eyes waiting. He didn't touch her hand right away. Just looked. Really looked. At the girl who had trusted him enough to whisper her heart into the dark. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. When his rough hand finally brushed against hers, she gasped, not in fear, but wonder. His palm was calloused, scarred by work and years of battle, yet his touch was gentle, like a promise. I don't know what kind of husband I'll make, he said softly. The kind who tries, she answered. And that night, under the soft ache of moonlight, they stood side by side before the fire. Not lovers yet, not strangers anymore. Just two souls learning how to breathe the same air. Hours passed. The lamp burned lower. Caleb sat back against the wall, eyes fixed on the dancing firelight. Clara drifted toward him, her head resting near his shoulder, the rhythm of her breath slowly matching his. Outside, the prairie wind carried the smell of rain. It was a good smell. New beginnings. By dawn, when the first gold touched the horizon, Caleb stirred. He covered her shoulders with his coat and stepped outside. The world looked washed clean. He watched the sun climb the ridge and thought about everything he'd lost. His brothers in war, his home, his hope. And now, for the first time in years, he thought maybe he'd been wrong about the world owing him nothing. Maybe this fragile girl asleep by the fire was his second chance. When Clara woke, he was already at the corral, fixing the fence. She stepped out barefoot, his coat still around her shoulders. You don't have to work yet, she said, smiling faintly. He looked up, smiled back just a little. Fence won't mend itself. She tilted her head, teasing softly, neither will a lonely heart. He laughed, a sound that surprised them both. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their lives grew steady. She cooked beans and bread by the hearth. He rode into town, traded goods, repaired the roof. At night, they talked. Slowly, she learned about his scars, the ones war left behind and the ones time couldn't touch. He told her about the brother he buried in Kansas, about the promise he'd made to never build a home again. She listened, never judging, just holding his silence like it was something sacred. And then, one night, when thunder rolled across the plains, she found him sitting on the porch, watching the storm. You ever get tired of being strong all the time? She asked. He looked at her, rain glistening on his hat brim. Every damn day. She stepped into the rain, barefoot, her white nightdress clinging to her knees. Then let me be strong for you tonight. The words hit him harder than the wind. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. She reached out her hand, and he took it without thinking. Together they stood in the downpour, laughing through the thunder, the earth trembling under their feet. When they went inside, soaked and breathless, the fire burned low again, same as the night they first spoke. She took his hand, pressed it against her heart. Do you feel that? She whispered. It's still yours, Caleb Boone. It always was. He stared at her, lost for words. All his life, he'd fought to survive. Now, for the first time, he understood what it meant to live. I don't deserve you, he said. She smiled through her tears. That's the beautiful part. Love ain't about deserving, it's about staying. He kissed her forehead, slow and reverent, as if blessing something holy. From that night on, the little cabin on the edge of Dusty Creek was never lonely again. They built their days with simple things, mended fences, tended a small garden, read old letters by lamplight. He carved her a heart from a piece of cedar wood, smooth and red in the firelight, and she hung it above their bed. Years later, folks in town still talked about the quiet couple who lived beyond the creek, the ex-soldier who found peace and the girl who taught him how to love without fear. When asked about the secret to their happiness, Clara would just smile and say, it started with a whisper. And sometimes, on still nights when the wind moved softly through the cottonwoods, Caleb would lean close to her ear and murmur the words that changed his life. It's my first night, the virgin bride whispered love heart. And she would laugh, still blushing after all the years, whispering back, and it's still mine too.